online town hall. My name is Eddie Almonte, and I'm a neighborhood planner at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. We'll start off with some welcoming remarks by our leadership at HPD and Councilman Richards. After we cover some ground rules, HPD staff will present updates from the Resilient Edgemere Community Plan, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion to answer some of your questions. Now, our Assistant Commissioner, Paris Schroeder, will say a few welcoming words, followed by Councilman Richards. So Paris, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to participate. We're really looking forward to hearing your comments. This is not really the beginning of this process. For those of you that joined us as we were working on the neighborhood plan 3 years ago, but it's a continuation. So we're just really excited to be here to have this conversation. Thank and I'm not sure who's in the room. I can't see from my phone, so I apologize. But with us as part of all of our efforts in the Eastern Rockaways, the community board leaders, community board chair, or Jonathan Gaska, the district manager. Just want to thank everyone. There's been a lot of residents that have been part of these meetings for a long time. So we just thank you for partnering with us. Want to thank the tremendous leadership of Richards. There's been a lot of challenging work out here, and certainly we don't always agree with community members or with electeds, but just a really great partnership with all of you. So I really appreciate that. Like I said, I'm going to be brief and turn it over to Councilman Richards to also have his introductory remarks. Thanks again for being with us tonight.
Thank you. It seems like we're together a lot these days. But I want to thank HPD. I want to thank the de Blasio administration. We don't often see eye to eye on everything. You know, all the policies and all the budgetary decisions that they make around the city. But one thing I can say confidently tonight is that this administration has certainly been committed to the Rockaways, especially Far Rockaway, like no other administration that I've worked with over the course of the last 2 decades. So I want to thank you for the work that you've put in. And I know I had to hop off the last town hall that we did. There are 3 town halls tonight, so I'm gonna have to do the same. But I wanted the community to know that I certainly heard a lot of the feedback, and that feedback has certainly not fell on deaf ears. You know, obviously the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and it certainly hasn't really changed anything for us, quite frankly. All it did was really pull out the systematic issues, the disinvestment that our communities have seen for decades. And really the remnants of that, just as Hurricane Sandy certainly did, is that it just unearthed all of the things we need to work on to make sure that we make the community better and more resilient and more sustainable. As HPD alluded to, the planning process for this kicked off, I feel like, over a year and a half ago at least. So I'm excited to be back here talking about this, especially in light of the damning numbers that came out today that the state released on what unemployment is looking like across the state, and how New York City is now at a 20% unemployment rate. And we know, even as we talk about the state, for communities of color, that unemployment rate is much higher than 20%. So we are hit harder than any other community, certainly around the city. So these opportunities, including downtown Far Rockaway, and you know, it's something that I'm proud of. We have over 100 people from Far Rockaway working on that project right now. You know, we've required a reporting agreement with that specific developer, and we just got our monthly report just last month. I mean, not last month, a few weeks ago. I think I sent that over to the community board as well, so that they can see that, you know, those days of people coming into our community and promising that they're going to do for us, those days are over. So we are going to be working very hard to ensure that as we move forward, any projects that are happening in Edgemere, just as we did in downtown Far Rockaway, that the community has priority on those specific jobs. I think there was a story that came out actually today on one of the gentlemen who's working on that project in downtown Far Rockaway who was unemployed for a while. There's still a lot of other things we have to work on. Obviously, healthcare, school seats, and through that Auburn East conversation, I've already told the de Blasio administration and the folks on this line that we need to ensure that we get serious about moving those things forward. Now, let me also be clear that a lot of the different projects that we're talking about, because I know folks were alluding to the now, and we have a future. You know, we may be going through this pandemic now, but I gotta anticipate within 5 to 10 years as we rebuild the economy that Far Rockaway and Edgemere and Auburn will be ahead of the curve, because we'll be a place where there's actually an opportunity to build. So being that the city is focused right now on ensuring that we can have investment, that we can get through this process, I really urge people to not just think about today, but to think about the future. Not just about, well, today we're in this pandemic. Okay, we're gonna get out of it. I have to anticipate that the economy bounces back at least in 10 years. It's going to take at least 15 years probably to build this out, although the city is telling me 8. I won't take their word for that. So I really urge us not to get short-sighted in saying, well, we should do nothing now. We have to put the pieces together so that in the future, as we move through the process, as investment continues to pour in, that we are ready to rise to the moment. So I don't want us to be short-sighted on that. There's still a lot to fight for. And there's no community in New York City that was built in one night. You know, there were pieces that were put together. So sort of as I envision myself as listening to you, as we go through these deals, my job is to make sure that I'm the architect sort of helping to guide and push the city to make sure that those pieces are put together around transportation, healthcare, and certainly school seats as well. And also, let me just add community center space. So first of all, for Peninsula Project, we have a 30,000 square foot community center commitment already from that specific developer. Was happy to hear that Ron Molis and the developers came back on this project and added another 22,000 square feet for a new facility. There's still a lot more conversation that needs to be had around that and what the programming looks like in that center. And then lastly, I just want to touch on commercial development, because historically in our community, we know we've been sorely under retailed. And once again, of course, if we talked about adding retail in the next few months, you're not getting on first base as much. But our job is not to think of just next month and 2 months. It's to think about 5 or 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line. So there's a substantial amount of opportunity here to make sure that there's both neighborhood retail and what we call destination retail. We need a combination of both. You shouldn't have to go to 5 towns to go to the cleaners. I lived in Ocean Village. I mean, my local supermarket was stop 1. I mean, you should not have to leave your community to find essential services. So we want to make sure that there's a mix so that we have year-round investment coming in, and that means jobs. Everybody talks about CB14 and how Rockaway leads Queens in unemployment. Well, of course you do if you don't have retail and if you don't build anything. So we're going to get out of that rut, I anticipate, as we bring about 300, 400,000 square feet of new retail online over the course of the next decade and more. So with that being said, tonight is a perfect night for this meeting because it is raining, which means that as we talk about building a more resilient and sustainable community, although we have got significant investment in Edgemere and Auburn on infrastructure, we know there's a long way to go to raising our roads, to ensuring that there's infrastructure investments. So on a night like this, we're not flooding. And then secondarily, the other part about that is we all know that the beach and the bay met during the storm, during Hurricane Sandy. So we now have an opportunity to make sure that even as the Army Corps put some features along the bay, that the city can also complement that with also what I think I would call passive park space as well, so that we can have an opportunity to also create new parks that can also serve as a resilient feature. I'm sure they will go through Bayswater Park, I think, tonight. I think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but we got about $60 million tucked into Bayswater Park. So that's going to add to amenities to the community, but also serve as a way to make sure that we're more resilient and sustainable as we move forward. So that was long. I look forward to going through this process and continuing this process. And I just want to end by saying that the days of saying we want nothing done, as I said when I got elected in 2013, those days are over. So I just want to make that clear on the line. We all have to figure out how do we shape projects, make them better for our communities, but the option is never zero for me. And I believe that the community largely agrees with that. So thank you. Thank you for the work. Congratulations on this presentation tonight. We look forward to refining it. We look forward to working with the community to make it better. And let's get Edgemere and Arvin moving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Richards, and thank you, Paris, for those welcoming remarks. Those important welcoming remarks. So to get back into our agenda, we just want to cover some ground rules before we start to present some of our updates that everyone is waiting to hear on. So we want to first acknowledge that we want to respect everyone's background and everyone's space within this virtual platform and make sure that everyone is being respected. So the following will not be tolerated and can be resulted in removal of the meeting, which include use of obscenities or foul language, racist, classist, homophobic, or transphobic language, or failure to yield time to next participant, or not respecting other participants' time during the Q&A portion. We also want to mention that participants in this meeting tonight can feel free to use the chat feature for general questions throughout the presentation, but questions directed to staff will only be answered during the Q&A portion. So if you want a question to be answered by our HPD staff or any of the agency representatives on this call, please make sure to ask those questions during our Q&A portion. And just another reminder, and I mentioned this before, that this meeting is being recorded, and by remaining in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. So with that, I would like to introduce my colleagues at HPD. Like I said, my name is Eddie Almonte, and I'm a neighborhood planner at HPD. And to start us off, I have Lita Aljabar on the line, and they'll introduce themselves as well, followed by Kevin Paris, who will talk a little bit later in the presentation. But for now, Lita, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Paris, and thank you, Councilman Richards, for the really helpful framing and opening remarks for this conversation we're really excited to have. So as Eddie introduced me, my name is Lita Aljabar. I work in the Resiliency Planning Unit at HPD, and I'm the lead project manager for this initiative. So I'm going to first set the stage here with some brief background for the work, and then my colleagues, Eddie and Kevin, will help me walk through some of these key proposals of the recommendations before you today for discussion, and then we'll share timeline and, of course, all the immediate next steps and ways for folks to stay engaged. But first, to just introduce who we are really briefly. At the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development, our mission is to promote the quality and affordability of the city's housing and thereby strengthening the diversity of its many neighborhoods. So while HPD and our agency is the lead on this particular phase of the Resilient Edgemere initiative, it truly is an interagency effort, and many of our agency colleagues are on the line here as well. But just to step back in time a little bit, Councilman Richards helped kind of cue up a lot of the context and framing for big picture what these investments in this community mean. But, you know, really we're involved here for those reasons of our city's mission, but we know that it's through this history of discriminatory policies really that the city, HPD in particular, has become one of the main landowners of vacant land here. So in 1997, the Edgemere Urban Renewal Plan was first created to develop housing and amenities. And then the first two phases were constructed up until the 2008 financial crisis when that stalled development. And of course, in 2012, Superstorm Sandy inflicted severe damage across the city and exposed these inequities within Edgemere as well. And really what that event did was demand a new model for development in this community. So a model which addresses the neighborhood's coastal vulnerabilities while also enhancing quality of life and delivering the housing and development. And this was really the context in which the Resilient Edgemere Community Plan was created with really a lot of dedicated help of many of you on the line. So flash forward to today, just want to acknowledge that we really, we see how the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Edgemere and Far Rockaway community especially hard across the city. So just want to convey how we are seeing all of these challenges as interrelated and approaching it in that way. So we do see this work in Edgemere as an opportunity to act on this vision for Eastern Rockaway, which positions the area as a mixed income community of opportunity, a model for resiliency and sustainability, and also as a regional waterfront destination. And although related to the Arvern East Development Project, which many of you may have heard about at the recent meeting, the work here within the Resilient Edgemere Plan is a separate set of initiatives that is actually at an earlier stage of development and design, so with many ample opportunities ahead of us to be able to shape these projects together. And with that, I'll actually pass the mic back over to Eddie to share some background on the community plan.
Awesome. Thanks, Lita. So what we are acting on now is rooted in an 18-month community-based planning process, including over 4 workshops, a mail-in survey, and door-to-door outreach, which engaged over 400 residents in Edgemere. The planning resulted in a long-term vision for the community, which includes peeling development back from the vulnerable edge and terracing new development towards a transit-oriented mixed-use corridor. The plan sets forth a land use framework and a set of goals, strategies, and projects led by various agencies, which together can realize the vision. What we're doing now is a set of land use actions which will codify the land use framework and unlock further investments in the strategies. So, as we've mentioned before, and many of y'all know, this planning process back in 2017, many of you, I'm sure, were part of. So as a way to sort of understand who's in the room and how we can gauge everyone who's in this call right now, we wanted to do a little polling activity, which should activate in a couple moments. But this question is just to ask people in the call if you were part of the Resilient Edgemere Community Planning Initiative in 2017. So feel free to answer the question if you feel comfortable doing so. And if you don't, that's okay. But we would like to take a couple moments to answer, and then we can share the results so people know who's in the room and who was part of the initiative. Cool. So it looks like we have some folks that were in part of the planning initiative back in 2017. So great to see y'all. We hope that these updates are useful and can provide a lot of context and background. And for everyone else that is new to the planning process, welcome. So Many of the projects under the strategies that were mentioned in the community plan have already been completed or are in process, such as expanded beach access to the reconstructed Rockaway Beach Boardwalk, creating new affordable homes, and over 3,000 square feet of commercial and community facility space at Beach Green Dunes 1 and 2, as well as helping homeowners recover from Superstorm Sandy through the New York City's Build It Back program, and also advancing new designs for Bayswater Park and Rockaway Community Park. So now we'll switch back over to Lita to give us some, so we can dive into some near-term project updates.
Thanks, Eddie. And just to put a quick early plug, which Eddie will share again at the end, the full update on the many projects of the plan is also encapsulated in a progress report recently released, where you can learn about a lot of those other project updates as well. But where are we now? So that you heard about the whole planning process. Where are we now? We are continuing to implement this vision by taking steps now that will essentially lay the groundwork for reaching the full potential outlined in the plan. Next slide. So here's an overview, and these based directly in the recommendations of the plan. We're now entering this phase of implementation, which will essentially codify that planning framework through a set of land use actions, launch a community stewardship through the advancement of a community land trust locally, as well as facilitate future development of amenities and housing in that mixed-use corridor. So we'll go through each of these in greater detail. But first, just a bit about how the geography of Edgemere really informs this strategy. So those of you living in the neighborhood already know what it means to live with water, and tonight is no exception, as we can see through our windows. But we know that, although the entire neighborhood and much of Rockaway is located in the high-risk floodplain, there are varying degrees of flood risk, be it from coastal storms and significant wave action along the bayfront, or to anticipated fluctuations of tide, rainfall, or the elevated groundwater, which we can anticipate to accelerate with climate change. These are different types of flood risks that affect the neighborhood and residents, of course, in different ways. So each of these risks, however, are expected to increase over time with climate change. So while there are plans in place for both bayside and oceanfront coastal protection infrastructures by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we still need a land use strategy in place to address this nuanced landscape of flood risk exposure over the long term. Next slide. So the recommended land use framework and changes here are intended to respond to that risk, using zoning and urban renewal tools that will limit new development in the areas exposed to greater flood risk, in this case in the hazard mitigation zone, and slightly less so in the limited development zone shown here, as well as maximizing amenities and housing within that mixed-use corridor further inland along the transit line. It's important to note that aside from these land use controls, all new construction will be subject and built to the flood-resistant construction standards. Next slide. So just traveling through these different areas in the hazard mitigation zone, the recommended amendments will limit any new private development to single-family detached homes. The amendments to the urban renewal plan here will prohibit any housing development on city-owned land and instead reserve that city-owned land for open space use, which, as Councilman Richards even mentioned, can support the overall resiliency strategies in the neighborhood. Next slide. In the limited development zone, the recommended changes will limit new development to 1- and 2-family detached homes, So based on the city's experience recovering from Superstorm Sandy, detached building types are just much more adaptable for future retrofits, repairs, and elevations. Next slide. And then stepping further inland in this mixed-use corridor along the A train, the proposed changes will make it possible to build commercial amenities. So the proposed zoning facilitates mid-rise development with commercial or community facilities by adding that commercial overlay and supporting this type of development. Also to note is that these developments are on larger footprint sites, so will also be more capable of further mitigating flood risk through site and building infrastructure. Next slide. And lastly, adjustments to the existing commercial overlays along Beach Channel Drive are recommended just to better reflect existing conditions in portions of the neighborhood that are fully built out, as well as to help facilitate potential future mixed-use development along the center commercial area along Beach Channel Drive. So we're also excited to be able to advance a key goal of the plan to form a community land trust in Edgemere. This CLT can help to expand affordable home ownership opportunities, as well as serve as a local steward for overall community resiliency. A community land trust, for those who may not be as aware, is a form of shared equity housing, which helps make a home ownership affordable by separating ownership of the land from ownership of the structure. So in a CLT, a land trust organization will own that underlying land and then lease it to the homeowner. That homeowner then owns the house structure, and they're able to build equity through mortgage payments as well as a capped percentage of the building's appreciation value. The CLT in return also maintains common infrastructures and often provides homeowner support services such as repairs and even financial planning. It's important to note that the Community Land Trust is a not-for-profit organization and it's governed by a board and a democratic process. So in the case of this opportunity here, the goal is to identify a CLT organization locally, which can develop new housing on city lots, either themselves or through a partnership with a development team. And furthermore, here in Edgemere, there's this really exciting opportunity for this community land trust to extend community stewardship to be able to support community well-being and resilience beyond just the home ownership component, and potentially serve as local stewards of land for open space, agriculture, or other landscape uses of interest, as well as supporting the housing stewardship, repairs, sustainability, and energy resilience that we know is so important in this type of coastal community. So just a bird's eye view of potential scenario. With the land use framework that we just outlined and the expanse of the scattered vacant city-owned land, there's really a huge opportunity to serve dozens of potential resilient housing and landscape sites for the Community Land Trust. So what we plan to do is, through a request for expressions of interest, to identify a local partner organization through this competitive process, and then work with them to refine essentially the organizational, financing, and development plans for that community land trust. As we shape this request for expression of interest, we want to hear more from you all about what you envision, what your goals are, and what concerns you may have for this land trust in Edgemere. So we plan to include extensive engagement and outreach and shape that with you. So I'll now actually pass the mic over to my colleague, Kevin Paris, to share some of the rest.
Awesome. Thank you, Lita. Picking up here, as we mentioned earlier, in responding to the community plan, we are looking at focusing development near transit pathways and other resources available in the community. Rockaway Beach Boulevard provides a strong corridor that can support mixed-use development. While we are already seeing housing coming online, we do feel that the actions that we're discussing here tonight can spur the development of stronger amenity options for the community. Next slide. So keeping in mind the goal to strengthen the commercial corridor along Rockaway Beach Boulevard, HPD seeks to utilize its vacant lots to help meet the demand for retail and community amenities. By assembling these lots, we will be able to plan for the development of 4 sites that will have the potential to bring online approximately 500 units, as well as more opportunities to bring about retail and community facility needs that we hope to identify with help from local area residents. Now, as with other HPD sites that are identified for development, we will be opening these sites to a request for proposal or an RFP that will be informed by a visioning process in partnership with local community stakeholders. So it's going to be through that process that we will have those conversations that are needed to discuss the types of housing and the amenity space use needs that should be envisioned for these sites. Next slide. We also understand that our work in Edgemere is just one of the initiatives that seeks to respond to the needs of the community. With respect to our goals, we see successful development here as another opportunity to foster a stronger connection between Edgemere and the changing waterfront. Next slide. So in order for us to begin realizing some of these goals, I wanted to share what we see as the next major milestones in our process. Tonight and continuing on throughout is our community engagement. We intend, as Lita mentioned, to release the request for interest the request of expressions of interest to identify CLT partners in the fall of this year, and more of the groundwork to get us to a targeted ULURP start date of spring 2021 will be underway. I will add that, I just mentioned that we'll be releasing an RFP, but that's currently planned to be released in 2022 at the earliest date. So there will be sufficient amount of time for the conversations that are needed and the workshops and the coordination with the community that we will need to inform what that RFP is going to look like. Next slide. So that brings us to our second polling question of the night. Which of the following are you most interested in and would like more information in the future? So we'll have the poll pop up, and folks, please feel free, if you feel comfortable, to respond. Nice. So I'll turn it over to you, Eddie, to carry us through.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Lita and Kevin. And just to acknowledge that from the polling question, it seems a lot of people are interested in learning about our initiatives with resiliency and also the community land trust, which is exciting, and we're obviously very excited to proceed with those as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about next steps and staying involved throughout this process. As Kevin mentioned in our timeline, we're starting with our engagement process, not only with this town hall, but with many other channels of engagement that will be both online and offline and through many different mediums. One of those mediums will be through our Resilient Edgemere 2020 progress report, which is out now. And this is an opportunity to really dive into the projects and goals and strategies that were referenced in the Resilient Edgemere Community Plan, and to have a better understanding of implementation and next steps for all those projects. So we have highlighted a lot of our big key next steps, like the land use actions and the zoning proposals, the community land trust, and also mention of other developments happening in the neighborhood, like Arbor Nice. But we also have a further next steps for all the projects that were decided in the community plan. So that's one way that that the community can start getting involved, is to see all of these updates on the plan and understand the next steps on where these updates are and how one can further get involved and see how these plans are unfolding. And another platform to get involved that we're it's new for us as we're implementing new platforms of engagement, and this is not the only platform, but it's through our Resilient Edgemere website, which is under nyc.gov/Edgemere. And here we just wanted to give a quick call to action to register and be informed of interactive activities that we will be hosting on the website. And as we try to decide what that looks like right now, through the conversations that we'll have in this town hall and through other forms of communication, for now, we want to ask participants and folks living in the community to register to use the online tools. Right now, you only need an email address to register. And once you do, you can already go to the Get Involved page and add any comments or questions about future engagement revolving the Resilient Edgemere initiative. And in the website, you can also download the progress report and share the progress report through the website as well. And some key moments to know for folks to know to get further involved in these projects. As I said, the mediums and platforms in which we will be doing engagement will be both online and offline, and we're still trying to figure out what will work best with the community. But for now, stay tuned to see more updates on the Community Land Trust visioning activities, which will start next month and in the fall of 2020, which will host either online activities or activities offline through a questionnaire to sort of understand more priorities around the Community Land Trust. And also another moment to be aware of, and an important moment, is the environmental and land use public review, which will start in winter of 2020, which will be a formal public review process for all the zoning proposals that we presented in the beginning of the presentation. And also, as I'm sure most people in this call are aware, please subscribe to our listserv and email updates so that you will be the first to know when there are moments to stay involved with all of these projects, and we will keep everyone updated with project updates as soon as we can. So with that, I would like to close the presentation and thank our panelists and presenters with providing these important updates for the community. And we're now going to switch over to our Q&A portion of the town hall. So if you give us one moment to switch gears and switch to now our Q&A part of the night. So for Q&A portion, I'm going to ask everyone who wants to ask a question to please use the raise hand feature, and I will call on your name in the order that your hand is being raised. And I already see some hands up, so that's great. I would also like to mention that if folks feel more comfortable asking a question in the chat window, we have some staff monitoring the chat window, and I will be looking at some questions in the chat as we progress through the questions being asked by folks raising their hand. So for every couple of folks that we answer questions with a raise hand feature, we will then answer some questions in the chat. So first off, I have Glenn, who is the first person to raise their hand. So I will unmute you, and then you can ask your question or provide comments.
I got it. You
Hey,
can,
Glenn.
Eddie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the meeting. Good to see you guys again. Just got a quick, I don't know if it's a question or basically a comment. I mean, I have a lot, but I don't want to take up everybody's time. I think we could do that later. But I guess the concern that I have is now that I'm seeing is there's a few more of these commercial corridors you're looking to build. The area desperately needs commercial, but you guys are working on an Auburn East proposal, and there is an Edgemere Commons that's already been approved, which is going to have a lot of square footage of commercial. So I'm just wondering, you know, obviously we see that, you know, commercial in the long run is going to get harder and harder for small businesses to stay open, not just due to COVID, but changing consumer habits as far as shopping online and things like that. So, you know, has that been really looked at and studied? Because Edgemere Commons is going to have a tremendous amount of commercial, and Auburn East combined is going to have a tremendous amount of commercial. So I'm just wondering if that's been thought about, and what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Glenn. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Thanks, Glenn. Good to see you again as well. That's a good question. I think what you're describing is how, well, essentially there's a commercial corridor essentially forming through many of these these projects that you just mentioned. With regards to the state of retail and commercial, I think given the current events, we don't yet have a full analysis of that. I think our awareness as a city is still forming, and we can certainly learn more. But I will just iterate that this is many years out before these buildings would actually come to be and the tenants in place. So I would just say that I think we have time to be able to be adaptive and respond to those conditions through this. We're also looking at this in the sense of commercial or community facility in these spaces. So there's a potential for other types of uses, community serving uses, to be in these spaces as well.
But nonprofits and stuff like that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for raising that question.
Great, thanks, Glenn. So up next, we have Eugene Falik, and I'm unmuting you right now.
Hello.
Hi.
I think this is very interesting. Since we spoke while you were on 40th Street, I think a couple of things. I assume you observed a huge traffic backlog that extended, you didn't see it, but on Beach Channel Drive it extended from somewhere past 40th Street back to 32nd Street. And I'm wondering whether you've investigated the traffic impact and the effect of DOT turning over the job of licensed professional engineers to city planners, number one. Number two, I was wondering to what extent you asked people what they thought of additional housing in Edgemere versus other uses for the area. Because while I was there, as you will recall, when I asked people what they thought of additional housing, the answer was uniformly against it, regardless of the interviewee's race or ethnic background. So I'd like your response to that. And third, what would you suppose would be a response to a ballot initiative to close down HPD as an antisocial organization?
Thank you, Eugene. So I'll take those questions maybe a little bit out of order. To the second question about additional housing, I do hear you, and I think we've heard definitely a range of opinions about bringing new housing to the area, different preferences around rental versus home ownership, and we're certainly all ears to continue hearing about kind of what forms and shapes would be preferred in terms of this housing. But I will speak to what...
1 second. Other than Donovan Richards, who else has proposed additional housing?
So I'll
Have you
just,
heard from the public?
so Eugene, if I could just finish my statement, because
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think yeah, that's okay. The housing, the way that we have certainly heard from the community interest and definitely preference in these amenities coming to existing residents as really the priority. The way that what the housing investments can do here is we are able to leverage some of these investments in the housing development to bring those community amenities and commercial amenities, leveraging that through the development. So this is definitely one of the ways that we're able to achieve other goals of the plan. I certainly hear you on the range of opinions for housing. On the traffic question, the traffic impacts of these proposals will be fully studied, not by planners, by engineers or folks who have really deep expertise in traffic impacts of development. And that's because we're doing a full environmental impact statement. So really an intense study of the traffic will be conducted and we'll be able to be open to that.
Licenses?
I'm sorry?
People with professional engineer licenses. Unlike DOT, which has a whole department that studies these things, but these people who do it are not licensed professional engineers. So,
yeah, thank you, Eugene. I just wanted to make sure, pass the opportunity for my colleague Kevin at HPD and colleague at Department of Transportation, Jason or Andrew as well, to chime in if you have anything to add. Kevin, I'll kick it to you first if you have anything you'd like to add to that question.
Yeah, I guess just to answer Eugene's question just now, yeah, we will be licensed professionals will be undertaking the analysis work that's needed for the EIS document that's going to come out of this.
And
thank you, Kevin.
Have you had, when you stopped people on the street or people came up to you at 40th Street last weekend, was it? What percentage of the people were in favor of more housing? Roughly. I know you didn't, write it down.
Yeah, I won't be able to say that I took, stats on that, but I think the conversations ranged. The conversations weren't limited to whether or not folks wanted housing or not. The conversations ranged on a number of needs and concerns that folks had just with everything that's happening out on the peninsula. So I wouldn't be able to have an answer that says X percentage or Y percentage were for housing or not.
But Eddie was there. He probably can comment better. Am I being unfair, Eddie?
Again, well, no, again, I think just, I don't want to speak on behalf of my colleagues. We weren't there, taking down numbers and those stats. We had a variety and a range of conversations on all aspects of what's happening out in the peninsula.
All right, I guess I've pushed this far enough. I will just comment one more thing in terms of resiliency. Once upon a time, I lived on Beach 38th Street. 1949, people used motorboats, and aside from canoes on the street, the water was so deep. But since then, the city has raised it about 5 or 8 feet. So I don't recall it's ever flooded. And your discussion saying Edgemere was most affected during Sandy, certainly the whole peninsula was. But I would suggest that the area that was most affected was Rockaway Park, which is an upper income area. Not to minimize what anybody suffered during Sandy, which was awful.
Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, we appreciate your questions and comments, and you know, we're always listening, but we do want to make sure that everyone else's questions are being addressed. So we'll go on to the next participant. So thank you again. So right next, I have Dolores Orr on the list.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everyone again. Summer's almost over. It's unbelievable, isn't it? So let me start by saying that I love the idea of the 1- and 2-family homes, the rezoning to do that. That is something we talked about from the day we began recovering from Sandy, and the areas that there'll be no development on because of the inability for anyone to mitigate the flood hazards in those areas along the bay. So those rezonings certainly are something we expected and I support. And the Community Land Trust is very exciting and a great opportunity for many folks. The selection of the not-for-profit is going to be critical in that, although we want local, and I don't know who is eligible locally, it is, in addition to local, I think a greater importance is someone that has prior experience in this area, that it not be someone new and unexperienced. So I think that's quite urgent. The concern I do have, I have to say, is the request for rezoning from the R4 to the R6A, which is to the mid-rise buildings. It's going to bring in 4 buildings, 500 units. And I don't think those sites are large enough. I'm not going to bore everyone with the statistics I presented during Auburn East, but in the 1950s and 60s, the city built over 7,000 units of affordable housing on very expansive pieces of land that provided green space, playgrounds, parking, meeting areas for individuals. Dunes 1 and 2 are concrete buildings. There are no outdoor meeting spaces. They're built right to the sidewalk, and it looks terrible. And it's not a welcoming place that you feel you're at home. I go past it and I think, oh my God, how do these folks feel? So I really, it is the upzoning to the 500 units in those mid-rise buildings that have not been thought out. It does not provide any of the things you would expect that people in the city of New York deserve. Regardless of their income level, they deserve to live in a positive, healthy environment, and I don't believe those buildings do that. I do have one question. I think in one of the on one of the pages, and the page with all the pictures give a demonstration of what zones 1 and 2 looks like now, and it's just concrete. It's concrete and nothing else. I think someone said that the commercial space in Dunes 1 and 2 is 3,000 square feet. And if I'm right, can you tell us what commercial space is occupied and by what types of commercial enterprises?
Surely. And first, Dolores, thank you for your comments. I want to, you know, we're taking notes here, and I think there's definitely room for a lot of those kind of urban design and building features to make their way into the buildings to come and learn from lessons where the prior developments maybe aren't serving the needs. But regarding the commercial space, I do want to pass to Kevin, our Director of Queens Planning, about the tenants in those buildings. I believe it's 3,000 square feet of commercial between the 2 buildings.
Right. Mm-hmm. So who occupies that now?
Hi, Dolores, again, echoing Lita. I do want to thank you for your comments. I do want to respond to a couple of them. So for the Dunes question, I don't have that in front of me right now. It's something I can get to you following this meeting to just make sure I'm speaking correctly on the current tenants of those two buildings. But I did want to respond to your comment about the rezoning, and I'll do this really quick. What the rezoning is going to do is going to unlock the potential of those sites to really allow those sites to provide retail and community facility opportunities. And another thing I just want to mention about what we're planning for those sites is they're going to go through our standard RFP process, and that's going to be the opportunity for folks like yourself and other members of the community to really direct us on what the vision should be for those 4 sites. And that way the development community, when they respond to the RFP, will have to respond to what the community feels would work on those sites. So, we're still real early on in the process for that, and there's going to be ample time for those conversations. And I'm looking forward to understanding just exactly what folks in the community think would work there from a housing perspective, as well as a community facility perspective or a retail perspective that we can bring there.
Kevin, can you just explain to the audience, by upzoning from an R4 to an R6A, how does that change how the site can be developed? That people understand the R4 is 1 or 2 family homes, and you're proposing, what is the maximum? Because in all honesty, with history, and this is not directed at anyone currently on this call, but the history with the city, what they tell us when we go to do rezoning and what they wind up doing after they've gotten the zoning and we've lost any control of it is usually very different. So at R6A, please tell everyone what that can mean, the maximum build out.
We have not gone into that level of detail for these sites, and folks will forgive me for not having that information at the top of my head. It is something I can get back to relatively quick. I used to have these, but generally what this means is that the FAR, the total floor area that's potential to be developed on the site is going to be increased. And as part of that increase, the sites are going to be mapped as MIH. So what it's basically going to do is going to unlock the amount of development potential that's afforded to each of those sites individually. It's going to turn those sites from being able to do, as you said, the 1 or 2 or 3 family homes to multifamily buildings. So it increases the development potential of those sites. And the exact numbers, I can definitely get back to folks as soon as I type it in real quick to figure it out.
Okay, because your diagram said site 4 would have 170 units. So a piece of land that would probably put 50 houses on there, you're now going to have 170 families there.
Because the size of those projects are going to be limited by the amount of development, the amount of floor area that's afforded to be built on that site. So as you increase the FAR, you increase the amount of buildable floor area that you can do. I mean, your building can be taller, can go higher, can be a little wider, and that is where you will get those additional units in.
So what I would like to see, please, each of those 4 sites, the R4, what would be the max build out if it stayed as R4 and what type of housing? And then if it went to R6A, what would be the max build out, including right to the sidewalk, no side yard, no anything, and how many units it could be. So you can certainly give that to us, but that is certainly something, if we're going to make an educated decision on our position, we would need to know that.
Definitely, that's something I can provide you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you, Dolores. So our next in line, we have Leonor. Sorry if I'm pronouncing anything.
Eddie, do you mind if I just add to what Kevin was saying? Just real quickly, just so folks can kind of, because obviously Dolores and then I know several others on the call too have been much closer to the other rezonings and just rezonings in general. But just generally, and I think there might be someone from DCP on the call too, but an R4, you're talking about 2-3 family homes, maybe a small apartment building that's a maximum, I think, of 3 or 4 stories. That's the only thing that's allowed under R4, no mixed use, no commercial, smaller buildings. So like Dolores was saying, R6 is generally, we're talking about the type of buildings that Beach Green Dunes 1 and 2 are. I believe it's the same zoning district that we proposed as those buildings. So those buildings are 8, 9 stories. I don't know the floor area ratios off the top of my head, but that's the type of difference we're proposing, and the type of density increase.
Thanks, Paris, for clarifying. So we have Leonore next on the queue for questions. So I'm going to unmute you now. Can you hear us? Can't hear you. Not sure if I'm having technical difficulties on my end, but we'll go back to Leonore and
Hello?
Oh, there you go.
Can you
Hi.
hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my question is whoever's involved in this project, the city or whoever, are they gonna hold the contractors responsible? Like the contractors like for Build-A-Back and these contractors that did Dune 1 and Dune 2, because the contractors that did Build-A-1, okay, it's great that they lifted 109 units up, but they spent, or they were paid close to $1 million for each unit, and the units were only worth $250,000. It would have been better if the people that owned the homes, they would have got the $1 million and they could have decided what they wanted to do. Now, Dune 1 and Dune 2, it seems like Dune 3 is the same contract that did Dune 1 and Dune 2, and the back of the building, they didn't create a sidewalk, and it's like garbage is there and mildew and these, and there should have been retail space in Dune 1 and Dune 2, because none of the lots that are in the Beach 40s are designated for any retail, and the Dune 3 is slotted for retail when they have the little mall where the Bravo thing is. And these contractors, they need to be ambassadors, not just build and they make a profit and they leave the what they do shoddy work. So who is anybody going to hold these contractors liable? And for this L&M contractor to do Dune 3, it should be contingent on them fixing the back of the building where it should have sidewalk, it should have lighting, they should be ambassadors and put like signs, banners that the people that walk from the nursing home when they go to the steps of the train say they like, we promote or we support our essential workers. They shouldn't have to be walking through the back way where there is no sidewalk. So who's going to hold these contractors accountable when they're doing shady work?
Thank you, Leonor. That's really helpful feedback. And I will say in general, it's just really helpful to hear exactly how these developments have played out. I will say on the Build-A-Back contractors, certainly there are some lessons learned there for any future work we were to do regarding in terms of supporting individual homeowners for their retrofits. So really appreciate that feedback. And I think with regards to the Dunes developments, so these are HPD multifamily developments. So HPD partners with development teams, and then they manage contractors. So we can certainly, keep that front of mind in the future developments to come as well, in terms of keeping the outcome to what was intended. And if there are also any particular, needs, be it sidewalks or maintenance and things like that, we can also include those kind of priorities within, as Kevin was mentioning, the community priorities and needs for the future developments to come as well, and can include that there.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Then thank you for listening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your question. We'll take next one on our queue is Sonia Moyes. Sorry if I mispronounced the last name. Hi, Sonia, can you hear us?
Yes, it's okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone. So I wanted to first start off by, I know what a CLT is. I know, I basically know what a CLT is, but not everybody knows what a community land trust is, right? So I believe you explained to it where it's led by, because I want you to tell me and everyone else who actually runs the CLT, right? Who runs a community land trust? I believe you said it was nonprofits, correct? And who picks those nonprofits? Is it HPD that picks those nonprofits?
Yes, through the competitive process.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And what's in it for the nonprofits?
So maybe I'll step back because you set up a good question, I think, for the general question, which is, what is a CLT? And it's totally worth reiterating. And we can set up more informational sessions specifically to dive in on that as well in the future. But basically, the premise of a CLT is it's an organization that's a nonprofit organization that supports typically affordable home ownership through serving at essentially the institution the nonprofit will own the underlying land and then be able to homeowners can purchase the housing structures that sit on the land. So the land trust owns the land and then leases that land to the homeowner, and the homeowner benefits from a more affordable price of home ownership because they're purchasing the structure, but they're a part of this community land trust. And the community land trust, in addition to providing this framework for affordable home ownership, is also an entity that supports general community stewardship and support for that community land trust itself. But to your question about what organization it is and who chooses them, essentially the way that we're looking at being able to support the community land trust for Edgemere is that what we have is this array of vacant lands that can be transferred to that community land trust, and that community land trust can serve either themselves or with a partner to develop the housing there. And the Community Land Trust is a nonprofit organization, but they are governed by a board that is often typically made up of part residents of the Community Land Trust, local stakeholders, and even sometimes elected or appointed officials that are responsible for the overall kind of decision-making and governance of that Community Land Trust. So being a nonprofit organization, it's not profit motivated, but they're mission motivated to serve the purpose of, in the most common instances, affordable housing. But in the scenario where we see opportunity for here is also some of the non-housing uses like the potentially community agriculture or open space uses. So in terms of how we will be able to identify that group or partnership to take that on that we can support, it's kind of a few steps in that process. One is that we know this is kind of a new concept, and we're still working on supporting the overall support for community land trust in New York City. So we have more outreach and engagement planned to not only capture folks' ideas about you all and the existing residents' ideas about what this community land trust can be, but also further outreach within the community of different organizations and understanding how we can best shape what this request for expressions of interest looks like. But that RFEI again, we're looking to do this with the help of folks in that outreach coming up over the next few weeks. But right now, some of the things that we've started thinking of prioritizing is to identify the nonprofit organization having a clear vision and mission to support the goals and needs of the community, and having a clearly articulated plan and organizational structure for how that entity may be formed and take shape, and also demonstrate their intentions for community engagement after they are potentially designated as that CLT. So I think a lot of these specific questions in terms of who's on the board and how exactly is it structured really have to be done with that CLT partner and the community. So some of that will be kind of identified along the way. I'm sorry if that was a wordy response, Sonia, but they were really good questions, and I want to make sure I hit what you were asking.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. That was very clear and concise. So I wanna touch a little bit on the resiliency, right? So, I live in Edgemere, right? My whole thing is, yes, we need resiliency, right? Flooding, we need control of that. We need to fix that. In addition to our access to the boardwalk, our access to the beach, right? Our access to the boardwalk we do not have, right? And this is stemming from, I'm on Beach 40th. So we're talking probably from Beach 36 all the way down to maybe 45th, 46th Street, where there is no, I'm sorry, it goes further. It goes further, even down to 54th, I believe. We can't access the beach, right? So how, for right now, currently, we can't access the boardwalk, period, right? Because there's is nothing there. It's, you take a chance just actually going to the boardwalk, walking the little makeshift path that's there, and hopes that you don't kill yourself or injure yourself, or because it's just not safe, right? So that entire part there needs to be, we definitely have to have access. In addition to that, we can't access the beach as well, right? Because of the piping plovers. So are you going to do something about that, about the piping plovers that, that stems from, for blocks that we can't access the beach? Once you do the boardwalk, all right, that's fine. Once you give us access to actually gain access to the boardwalk sufficiently, what's going to happen when we actually want to access the beach, with the pipe and plovers? Like, are you going to address that? Or, is that going to be moved? Are you going to shorten the amount of space that's needed for the pipe and plovers so we can actually enjoy the beach in Edgemere?
Yeah, thank you, Sonia, for the questions. I think there are two ways to take your concerns, and one is the access to getting to the boardwalk and the beach itself, and the other is just the experience and access you have at the beach. Regarding, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, actually, who may have some helpful updates for you regarding related to some of the improvements with the Arbor site.
Yeah, thank you, Lida, and thank you for those comments, Sonia. Specific to your comment about access to the boardwalk, the area that you mentioned falls in line with the area of the Arbor East project, and so folks who are in the room who may not be aware, there is a project happening called Arbor East. A significant portion of the first phase of that project is the creation of a nature preserve. And the nature preserve is going to extend from Beach 44th to Beach 56th. So within that area, Sonia, that you're talking about, and within that nature preserve will be these pathways that not only will take you through this new nature preserve, but there's also going to be opportunities to connect to the boardwalk. As part of the actual development portion of Arbor East as well, there will be pedestrian pathways that also will connect you to the boardwalk. And we're talking from Beach 32nd to Beach 44th, which would be the development footprint of the Arbor East site. So we'd be looking at least from Beach 32nd to Beach 56, there will be ample opportunities to get to the boardwalk, much different than the conditions that exist here today. I think we have our colleagues from Park. Sorry, go ahead, Sonia.
I'm sorry. So you said access to the boardwalk. So now so in reference to access to the actual beach. So
Right,
you're
so
saying that the pipe and plovers will continue to be there, and we just have to
sorry,
walk
yeah.
around it?
What I was going to do is I wanted to call on my colleagues from Parks who may have a better response or a better sense of what's going to happen with that.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, my name
I'm
is
sorry,
Mitchell
yeah.
Loring.
Yeah, there we go, Mitch.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Hi there, Sonia. My name is Mitchell Loring. I'm at the Parks Department. So HPD's Resilient Edgemere plan does not have any real impact on the way that Parks monitors and protects the federally regulated species like piping plovers on the beach. As of right now, this project won't change the way that we do monitor and protect these species on the beach, as we're regulated by the federal government to do so.
Okay, so basically nothing's changing. The pipe and plovers will be there, and we cannot access that portion of that beach, which is pretty much from beach 36, and correct me if I'm wrong, from beach 36 to beach, I want to say 54th or 52nd, where there's like that entire area is filled with the pipe and plovers.
Yeah, I don't have the exact streets at the top of my head, Kevin. I don't know if is it possible to also unmute Eric Peterson, our Rockaway Parks Administrator. Eric, I don't know if you have a little bit more info about how
yes,
access regulations go on, but.
So the plover, the designated plover section, technically Rockaway Beach Endangered Species Nesting Area, if we like acronyms, is from beach 38 to beach 57 streets. And at present, as everyone in the neighborhood knows, because of beach erosion, we really can't have much beach access between about beach 32 and about beach 35, just because there's no beach to access there at high tide. The water comes up underneath the boardwalk. We're working with the Army Corps on, as most of you know, on a number of projects to fix that problem in order to add sand and to retain the sand with new groins. So over the next couple of years, that work will be completed, which then will let us open up more of that beach in the middle 30s for swimming and sunbathing and all the other kind of beach activities that folks have. There still will be the plover zone from 38 to 57, but we definitely are committed to improving the quality and quantity of beach access east of beach 38 to serve this area.
So I'm sorry. So for Mr. Peterson, so now I can actually see, I can pair the face with the name, because I know we email each other all the time.
All the time, Sonia.
All the time. Okay, so you would enhance the access to the beach? Like, what would there be, like pathways like in between those particular streets, like between 38th and 57th, where we can walk through and still like access the beach?
No, so I mean, you'll still have to stay on the boardwalk between 38 and 57, but right now, if you are, say, at Beach 50th Street or Beach 40th Street,
Right.
the nearest place you can actually use the beach is about Beach 32nd, just because of the problem with the beach.
Right.
There's a little bit of space around Beach 36 and 38, but not much sand there. So I'm just saying that although the plovers aren't moving anytime soon, and we do have those internal conversations from time to time about, does it make sense to shift the plover zone, to grow it, to shrink it, to whatever it. That's not in the cards right now, but definitely to make the improvements to the beach east of the plover zone, east of beach 38, is something that's very much on our minds, and improving the amenities in that neighborhood there. Our Dept mentioned earlier in the chat adding fitness equipment in this section is definitely something that we're looking at as part of the master plan. And then as Kevin mentioned, the Arvern East project will not only make the nature preserve from 44 to 56, but will improve the connectivity from the existing boardwalk, stairs, and ramps to the neighborhood street network on the other side of Edgemere Avenue.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Peterson. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, Sonia.
I want to take it back to HPD, and this is the last thing that I'll say. As far as changing the R4 to an R6A, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that feels that we really don't need you to change that. We need more home ownership. With the Arvern East project, is going to be plenty of affordable apartments that's going to be built. So increasing this, changing from an R4 to an R6A is just totally unnecessary. You're building more buildings. You're shifting people from one apartment complex to another apartment complex instead of actually having ownership. We need home ownership, right? In order for us to build generational wealth, that's one of the things that we need is home ownership. So please, I would prefer you not to change that R4 to R6A. And also, we need also access to healthcare and also education. And we need jobs. You're bringing so many people here into the Rockaways, especially in this area, when there is no job opportunities. Like I said on our last call, if L&M can make a commitment, if we can get something in writing to say that, they should actually hire from within. We have skilled professionals that live in Rockaway. We have plenty of them, so we need some sort of commitment. What are they going, you're building all these different things, but, in the back end is also, what can you do for the people here that are already in Edgemere, who have been here for years, who have put their blood, sweat, and tears into this community. And we were promised so much at one point, and we have failed to see anything actually flourish here. I bought my house here 15 years ago, and we were told that we were promised so many different things, and we have gotten nothing. So we should actually get something that, something that's sustainable, something that you can give back to us. So it's a bunch of things that I can draw down the line, but you know what? I'm not going to take up any more time. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll let the next person speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Sonia.
Sonia.
Yeah, we hear you. And just to reiterate on the sites for mixed use development, and Kevin, I don't know if you want to talk more a little bit about this, but there's still a lot of engagement that needs to be that can happen with those sites, which include if they can be either home ownership or rental. So that will be further down the line when we do more community engagement on those sites. And we will include those types of questions when we get there. So it's still a lot to form for those higher density mixed use sites. But yeah, thank you for your question. And we'll go to Glenn again. I see that you made your way to the top of the list. If you don't mind keeping your question a bit shorter, since we have other folks that haven't asked a question yet.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate it. So I'm looking through the old Edgemere Urban Renewal Plan, like I have the old Arvern Urban Renewal Plan. So one of the things that was discussed is now we're talking about this upzoning along, looks like it's along Beach Channel Drive. So the whole Edgemere Urban Renewal Plan clearly states there was not to be more than 800 units. Okay, so with Beach Green Dunes 3 plus all of these 1 and 2 family homes, heights of the building were not supposed to be over 25 feet. This is my study. This is not my plan. This is HPD's plan. This was a plan that I have with HPD. I love that you guys want to do community improvement, but you sell the community one thing And then when nobody's paying attention, thank God I'm knowledgeable and other people are knowledgeable, you go around and change what you've already proposed to the community. So this plan that was put out in 2008, and we know it's a long time ago, but this is kind of like what was put out there, what's been studied. Environmental studies have been done. No more than 800 units, and the buildings were not supposed to be over trees. So what do you have to say about going and choosing what you, taking things that you want out of the study and then just doing whatever you want and going against your own rules and plan that you sold to the community in the studies? I hated it for years, and the people of Rockaway are kind of sick of it. So, you know, I don't want to be confrontational. It gets me very agitated. I don't want to get agitated, but, you know, the Edgemere urban renewal area is supposed to be no more than 800 units. Dwelling units, I don't mean residents, dwelling units. A two-family home counts as two. So the buildings were not supposed to be more than 25 stories. I mean, 25 feet. It clearly says it in HPD's document, and I'll send it to you if you need me to, and I'll share it with the community. So that, you know, it's a statement, but it's a question. Why do you keep going against things that you've already sold us and we've already kind of like determined?
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. And you were breaking up a little bit there, but I think I essentially heard that there's some sense of frustration around the changes to plans that have been through extensive, you know, processes with you all, and just the changes in the plans that were understood and accepted. Is that right? There was some breaking up in your
I mean,
video.
you're gonna,
Okay.
yeah, you're gonna greatly increase what was originally sold to us. I mean, someone like Sonia, she bought into the Edgemere urban renewal area. That was part of the plan. And now you're going and changing it again because, you know, New York City has an affordable housing crisis and the city's just gonna look to bring everybody into Rockaway. So, okay, we'll create 500 jobs, but you're gonna bring 25,000 people here with no, and listen, I love development, trust me, you know, people that know me, but it's got to be done right. If it's not done right, you're just creating persistent poverty. You're not providing people with opportunity. And I get it. You guys know a lot more than you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And you guys, I know your intentions are good, but also your intentions are not only yours, they're part of other people's intentions as well. And we don't trust the city and we don't trust developers. And we want to make sure that you're sticking to the plan. It was supposed to be no more than 800 dwelling units, and buildings were not supposed to be over 25 feet in height as part of the Edgemere urban renewal.
I hear you, Glenn. And I think the one thing I would like to see which specific part of the urban renewal plan you're speaking of. I'd be happy to take a closer look at that. The one thing I will say is that the 2008 plan is actually an amendment to the 1997 plan. So I think and every time there is a change to the urban renewal plan or zoning, there's a really extensive process of analysis and engagement. And so the reasons that this doesn't change your frustration, but the reasons that we go into these intensive processes of change, which are quite time intensive as well, is because the context has changed so much that sometimes those plans need to be shifted a little bit to make the most successful development or investment come to the space. So in the context of, for instance, market changes, natural disasters, and growing awareness around future climate hazards are two examples, as well as the affordable housing crisis writ large, just to help kind of shed some light in terms of how the context and pressures change so much that brings us to these places. But I definitely hear your frustration, and we don't enter these changes willy-nilly, if you will. It's really a thoughtful process, and we'll have a full process through the environmental review and the ULURP to be able to really vet and shape that as well. So thank you for your comment.
Great, thank you, Glenn. And I know we're at time, but I want to give some space to folks that still have their hands up with questions and also address some questions in the chat. So I'll continue addressing some questions that are from folks that have their hands raised. And the order kind of jumbled around a little, but I remember that Alexis Smallwood was after Glenn, so I will unmute you for your question. Oh, you're still muted. Hold on.
Can you hear me now? Hi, everybody. Good evening. Mine's a couple comment. I live in Auburn View, which used to be Ocean Village, and I kept telling everybody not to agree to become unstabilized, and not everybody was educated in the process. And because everybody heard about the HPD Section 8 and all these wonderful things that were paved in gold, I kept telling them, no, it's better if we just stay rent stabilized. And now we're not rent stabilized, and you have people who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to pay the rent. L&M still hasn't fixed a lot of the issues since Sandy. We still have a lot of apartments that are vacant because they have mold. And in my apartment, I suffer with a lot of plumbing issues, a lot of leakage issues, and not only that, we're understaffed. And the staff here are tired and exhausted, and they don't want to speak up because they don't want to lose their job. So that's another thing. L&M and Bluestone and Triangle Eagle, they should not get any more properties. Do not let them develop any more properties. And to everybody on this call tonight, I say that we need to organize and we need to take it to the media. That's the only way that we're going to get heard. It's not the employees at HPD. They're hired to do what they have to do to take care of themselves. But as far as what we have to do, we need to make sure we're organized and that we take our message to the public and to the media. It's not fair that me and my husband are going to have to move to Delaware because we want good schools for our kids and because we want to be homeowners. My husband should not leave the MTA where he's basically wondering how he's going to get from Jersey to the MTA and not be able to do overtime. Like, these are things that we're worried about because Rockaway does not have good schools. They let all these charter schools come in and take over the public schools. So that's what we're worried about right now. How are we going to give our kids a good education and become homeowners? And so that's what I say to the group right now. We need to organize and make sure that our voice is heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to thank Alexis as well and thank her for her comments. Yeah.
Great. So next we have Shayna Gursky. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that as well.
You're good.
You are.
Hi, thank you so much. This is really informative. My mother's a real estate broker and she is also really enjoying your presentation. If you can just let me know about some contact information that I can give her, that's point number 1, please. Number 2 is educational opportunities, both in increasing adding a school building on the site. You know, if there are, for accommodating the existing residents, that there are more schools for everybody who already lives in the area. And then, you know, to take a survey, if there's going to be a huge population increase, there have to be more schools to accommodate all of the new potential students coming in. Especially going forward, if there's more social distancing and they have to add more classrooms so people can spread apart and still learn well, please take that into account. Then also on the education standpoint to, you know, is there a educational curriculum is there a curriculum that's going to come in with regard to resiliency and environmentalism? And then the last question is if there's a lot of trendy things happening with, you know, environmental education and environmental policies, green buildings, energy efficiency, solar panels, you know, wind power, and then especially after the tropical storm a few weeks ago where a lot of the Rockaways lost power. If anybody needs help with that, they can call me in my office. But you know, what can we do to increase the environmental efficiency of these buildings that are going up, improve the existing utility infrastructure, and look into ways to prevent power outages from downed wires in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shana, for your thoughtful comments. To start up at the top, regarding the education and schools question, we are reserving, there's a site within Edgemere that is reserved for a future school. It's actually already now in the hands of the Department of Education. So there is site and space being reserved for the construction of a future school as it's needed. To your kind of curriculum component, I think that's a really interesting idea around building in education and programs around resiliency and environmental or ecological studies. We don't really have that level of detail within what we're proposing, as it's essentially kind of changing certain types of, I guess, rules around development, but certainly it's possible that some of those programs or educational activities could become a part of what fills those spaces, for instance, community groups and the like. To your last comment on green energies and green technologies, regarding the developments themselves, we also, HPD and in general, our teams are really interested in also pursuing the most energy efficient, sustainable and resilient building in this neighborhood as well. And we have already been looking at all of the potential opportunities with that. Actually, Beach Green Dunes 1 and 2 are really strong examples already of what the potential is around renewable energy generation in the area. So they've already kind of provided proof of concept through those buildings around the opportunity for solar and for even geothermal energy in this area. So we can incorporate those goals, and both in the community visioning and engagement that will be done as a part of the RFP process that Kevin mentioned earlier, and also incorporate those goals within the request for proposals to encourage developers to submit sort of the best in class in both resiliency and sustainability. Because as I think you alluded to as well, the energy resilience is not just a sustainability goal, but also it serves a lot of the needs for community resilience in the context of storms and power outages. And so that's certainly a goal as well that we can encourage. I did want to actually take this comment I think is helpful in terms of transitioning to another question I'm seeing in the chat box around opportunities around open space and urban farms. And so there are some questions, will there be opportunities for an urban farm, community garden, questions around that. And I wanted to just recognize that there certainly are. And we're very aware that there's so many strong organizations already operating farms and agriculture that serves a lot of community needs throughout the neighborhood. So the big opportunity there is partly with that community land trust opportunity. So one of the opportunities with the community land trust that we want to open the door for in Edgemere is that a traditional housing community land trust has the opportunity to either partner or otherwise steward some of those open space sites for some of these uses that you all are already mentioning.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Shana, for your question. As I said, I know we're reached our time limit, but I'm still going to take the remaining questions here. And I just want to remind folks before leaving the call that we do have a town hall survey that will be administered through the Zoom platform. So I I want folks to stay on after the questions to take the survey so we can get some of your feedback on how we can do further engagement with the community. But we'll take the next question, which is Jasmine Abrams. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So I actually had the question about the urban farms, and thank you for answering that question. I just had a follow-up. So how big are the allocation sites for projects like these?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really a range. We'll be posting the presentation, but if you look back at the map, we have a lot of really scattered sites. So some of them are single parcels, like 25 feet by 100 feet deep. And then we have a few instances where there are several parcels adjacent to one another. So in some cases, you have a site or two that may reach 3/4 or up to an acre in size. So it's really a range there.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine. So next we have, there's no name here, but it's Galaxy A10e, so it's a device. So I'm gonna unmute you and hopefully you can ask your question. Can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you.
With the Build It Back program, is that coming back to lift homes? A lot of homes in the Far Rockaway area kind of missed out on that program, and I was just wondering if it's coming back. That was one. My second question was the parking issue. I'm like directly across from the 40th Street projects, and most of those people do not pay the city for their parking, and they bombard my block and 40th Street and 41st Street with their cars, and it's just really, really, really annoying. I could never get parking like in front of my house. I have to park like 3 blocks away, or pull inside the yard. But I was just wondering what is in the works for that as far as parking is concerned and lifting homes.
Thank you. Sorry, the parking question and what homes? Oh, lifting homes. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Sure. So I'm actually going to defer your question on Build It Back. We have a colleague here on the line from the Housing Recovery Office who can help us speak to that program specifically. Sherelle, are you still on the line?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Yes, so can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Build It Back program, we are actually in the process of finishing up our last homes. So no, only way it will come back if we have another superstorm Sandy, in which we're hoping we don't. And the other part to your question was?
For parking.
Oh, parking?
We can take that one. Thank you, Sherelle.
You're welcome.
And then just to add onto that, we're even though the Build It Back program, it is funded by the disaster recovery funding, as Sherelle mentioned, we would like to hear some, we can have some other conversations around what the needs are in the neighborhood about folks who maybe weren't able to benefit from that program, and we can take that into consideration as our general, preparedness work as well, and see what ways the services the city provides aren't meeting the needs. So thank you for raising that.
Okay.
And regarding parking, I think it's definitely a good question that we hear folks have challenges with in general. We, as part of the developments proposed between the smaller, lower density homes and the multifamily buildings, definitely some level of parking will be provided with those developments to support those parking needs. But again, I'll just note that we will be undergoing a full traffic and transportation analysis as well to really understand that. But I might have you just share that intersection you mentioned just one more time so we can look at
Okay,
that
so
spot
it's
more
Beach
closely.
40th Street between Beach Channel and I think that would be Far Rockaway Boulevard. I mean, yeah, what is it? Rockaway Boulevard, Beach 40th Street, Beach 41st Street, and I believe Beach 42nd Street. We have no
Beach
parking
40th.
signs. There's like
Okay, and
no
it's a
parking
street
signs
parking
there at
count.
all. And probably Beach 39th as well. There's like no parking signs there at all. But I noticed on Arvern streets, like you can't park there at all. Like you'll get a ticket. So I don't understand why if they have that special permission and we don't when we own their homes as well. You know, it's actually quite racist if you ask me. That neighborhood has that, and we don't even have a parking sign.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think that's a condition that we can definitely look into a little bit more to see how we can be, of assistance to that specific issue.
Okay, well, I hope you guys do because it's quite it's an everyday issue for me.
Understood.
And I'm sure for everyone who lives on Beach 40th Street, Beach 41st, Beach 39th, Beach 42nd, and it goes on.
Right.
They're fighting for parking with people that have parking assigned to them, but they refuse to pay.
Right.
And not only just that, they're buying cars from there's a auction, house that open up. They're buying cars and they're parking it there. They're leaving motorcycles and old cars in your block for months, taking up your parking. And then they leave trash all around, and we get tickets for that. It's just unfair. So I was just wondering when are we going to get to that parking, especially the parking issue. I think something needs to be done about that for us. But that's about it.
Thank you. And
Thank
sorry
you
we
for the
didn't
comment.
get your name, but
Keon.
Keon. Thank
I didn't
you,
know how
Keon.
to change the Galaxy A10. This is my first time, by the way. My first time in a meeting.
Oh,
Well, that's a cool name too, Galaxy.
Well, thanks, Keon. And I'm glad we were your first Zoom meeting. So next and last that we have from our queue of raised hands is Marie Adam Blvd. Hello.
One of the speakers spoke about the schools, and I understand that you have some land set aside for that, but the school should be built simultaneously with everything else. We're not going to wait for families to move in and then decide, well, now we have to build the schools, because the families are going to have to send their children somewhere, which means that the other schools nearby are going to be overcrowded, and we do not want that. Who would want to move to a community where they do not know where they're going to have, where they're going to take their children to school? So I really think that that is a must as you're doing the development, that the schools are being built simultaneously so that when families come in, they have somewhere to send their kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, for that. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we went through the questions and from all the folks that raised their hands. And thank you, Marie, for your comment. There are some comments and questions in the chat as well that I've been looking and monitoring, and there's some comments around local hiring and how workers will be will require a local requirement for new development. So Kevin, I don't know if you want to take on that question with any sort of HPD finance development that are happening in the neighborhood and how contracting and local hiring works with that.
Sorry, I didn't catch the full breadth of what the question or the comment is.
Yeah, sure. It's some questions around local hiring for new construction. So any new construction that are financed by HPD, how does it work with the construction contractor, and how does that triggering any agreements with local hiring?
So as it relates to new projects, as part of when we get to the closing phases of those projects, we do have our development partners submit to us what their local hiring plans are. It varies depending on you know, how should I put it? When I say it varies, what I mean is that we have development partners provide us with what their local hiring plan is going to be, and that's part of the evaluation as we get to the closing of the projects. And so as the projects come online, we will be having development partners, you know, submit that documentation to us to ensure that, you know, they're following local law, you know, that they're doing their best efforts to hire locally. We also have, and I'm blanking on the exact name, but we do have with all HPD finance projects, MWBE compliance component of our projects where development partners have to ensure that a certain percentage of their development plan is going to MWBE firms, contractors, and that plan is heavily evaluated internally, and it's one of the key components before we can move forward with closing on a project.
Great, thank you. Another question I'm seeing previously in our chat is also around the CLT, and I think there were just some questions around who will be the group that will take ownership of the CLT, and how does that process work? So we have Michael on the line that can maybe answer that question a little bit clearer, because I know we've talked a little bit about the competitive process, but just to reiterate how that process will work again.
Yeah, so I think one thing just to be clear, you know, when we're talking about, hi everyone, my name's Michael Sandler. It's nice to see folks again, a lot of familiar faces from our process in 2017. With the Community Land Trust, you know, there's no current organization, there is not an existing nonprofit that exists that does the scope of things that we're looking for a community land trust in this neighborhood to do. And so we're looking to help to create a local organization that can do housing development, that can build resilient 1- and 2-family homes, that can also manage open space and help homeowners ongoing. So we're looking through this process to help create a real community-based organization that has those different functions. And so we're going to be asking this fall for folks to kind of let us know that they're interested. That's what a request for expressions of interest is, to help to kind of create a new organization that has those different roles, with the idea being that this is going to take time to really implement and to create a new organization here. Because, you know, we're talking about, with the Community Land Trust, we're talking about community ownership of land. That's going to take a lot of organizing by the Edgemere community and the organizations and individuals in the Edgemere community to figure out how to have community ownership of land. And so we want to help with that. We're going to sort of be asking who's interested in participating and help select a group to kind of steer that process. And then that group is going to have to then be working with community members to kind of form that governing structure that works for this community. So that's sort of what that process is going to look like. And we're talking about an organization that can own land in perpetuity. And when I say perpetuity, I mean forever. And so it's going to take some time to set up an organization that can successfully operate forever.
Thanks, Michael. I see Sonia, you raised your hand, so I'll let you take the mic again.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I want to piggyback off of what Keon said, which is very true. You know, for us homeowners here in Edgemere, parking has been a hassle. It has been hell, if I can say that. And you also have to take into effect that we also have the COVID-19 testing site that's here, that, remember, that lot was supposed to be slated for a school, and which the other young lady had said previously. It was Marie, yes, thank you. It was Marie who stated that the school should be built at the same time that, you know, all this resiliency and all these other projects are going on, because we can't wait, right? Because we see already what happened when we waited, right? Now we have a COVID-19 testing site that's literally in our backyards that should not be there. So parking has become even more restricted, right? So my idea was, and Eddie, I posted this in the chat, so you don't have to actually look at that, my question. So my thing is, for us homeowners, right, who literally bought into this Edgemere resiliency project, right, when we bought our homes and they promised us so many different things, is there a way where you can have just parking, you can situate our parking to where it's only for the residents who are actually were part of the initial plan of the Edgemere plan? And, you know, I think that would be a great payback, a great give back to us, because we should not have to fight for parking. We should not have to clean up our, well, I don't mind cleaning up our streets, because on several of our blocks, we don't have alternate side of street parking, and we are responsible for cleaning up our own streets. I don't mind that, but what I do mind is people actually coming to dump their garbage after I already cleaned up the garbage that was in front of my home. If there was restricted parking to where it's only for the residents or only for the homeowners within this community, then that will definitely be eliminated. I cannot tell you how many times I have called and complained about the unsanitary practices that I do see from people who just come and they dump their garbage and they go across the street either to NYCHA, or they go about their business as they're walking towards to catch the train. You understand? So I think that that would be, you know, a great give back to the people who actually bought into the Edgemere plan years ago when they started building the homes here.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. I hear your frustration, and I appreciate everyone sharing that, you know, the challenges with the limited space really as it regards to parking. I think that, you know, in public space, we really are not in a position to be able to be, you know, all residents of the community have equal access to the public space in that way. But we can and will do our best to see about mitigating some of these parking related issues for sure. And we do hear your concerns. And really do honor and appreciate the really extra effort that folks who were involved in all of the planning work have contributed.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia, again for voicing that, and we do hear you. But with that, it is 8:30, and I would like to wrap this up just to respect everyone's time. So just to say, just to reiterate, all of our questions that were asked in the chat, we will save that and we will have that as a reference just to make sure that we cover that as well on top of the folks that asked their questions verbally. So just to say thank you very much, everyone, for being here and for staying a little late. And I want everyone to please stay on the line on the Zoom platform to do the survey. And we will keep you informed with any updates on the Community Land Trust and the public review process. So thank you so much. And like I said, please stay on the line. The survey will pop up through the polling feature. And there it is. So thank you, folks, and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Mm-hmm.